Hi, in this video I'm going to show you some of the new features we have in the upcoming 6.2.4 release of IBM Copy Services Manager. I'll give a quick product overview first and then I'll get into the new features. Alright, so for those that aren't familiar with Copy Services Manager, what is it? We are a one-stop shop for your block replication needs for all of IBM storage systems. So this includes DS8000 to the Spectrum Virtualized or Spectrum Accelerated products and FlashSystem storage systems. We provide a single pane glass, a web interface that lets you create replication relationships as well as monitor those relationships. And we scale to thousands of volumes, including support for Metro Mirror relationships, global mirror relationships, FlashCopy relationships, and even your more advanced 3-site or 4-site solutions. We install on all the major platforms and even run now on the DS8000 HMC. We provide disaster recovery capabilities and high availabilities, including HyperSwap support. So we have Z system HyperSwap, as well as support for PowerHA HyperSwap. And now I'll talk about in a little bit A9000 HyperSwap as well. We have practice sessions to allow you flash and practice your DR capabilities so that you can practice the way you recover. And last, we have a lot of protection mechanisms from warning prompts to user rules and site awareness that allow you to make sure that you're replicating the direction you want to replicate and managing things the way you want to manage. All right, with that, I'm going to go into the new features. So this is a high view of the new features, but I'll get into that in more detail now. So the first one I want to talk about is the request to show more sessions on the session overview panel. In previous releases, I think we showed only about 8 sessions. The table was much smaller, and there was a lot of screen real estate on the session overview panel that was unused. It was just blank space. And so there's been a number of customers who said, well, we have, more than 8 sessions, some of them in hundreds of sessions, and so it's a pain to only see 8. Why don't you show us more? So we've increased the size of the table. It'll fill out that space based off the size of your browser window automatically whenever you load that panel, the session overview panel. So as an example, you can see here, you got a lot more sessions visible, and now you can see the progress. You can monitor the actual state of multiple sessions at once. All right, the next one I want to talk about is some performance improvements for FlashCopy on DS8000. So just to start with, I'll explain CSM supports all the different flavors of FlashCopy on DS8000, including the ability to flash without the incremental option. So the incremental option lets you every flash only copy over the change tracks. But if you don't choose incremental, what we have to do for the hardware is terminate the existing relationships and then reflash everything with the new point-in-time copy. So what happened was we found that there was some inefficiencies in what we were doing in CSM, where we split the actual commands to the hardware into different threads that called the different LSSs that might be managed by that session simultaneously. And the issue was that the terminate and the reflash was in the same thread. And so what would happen is some of the LSSs would finish their terminates and start doing their establishes for the new flash copies before other LSSs finish their terminates. And what this does is the establish actually starts, in order to keep consistency across the session, actually puts the volumes that got established into long busy. So you end up in a longer long busy time frame because some of the LSSs haven't finished their terminates. So what we did is we split it out. So now we make sure that all the terminates are done across the LSSs, and then we do the reflashes with the new point-in-time copy. So now none of the LSSs are waiting for other LSSs to do their terminates, and we minimize that extra impact time. Okay, the next feature I want to talk about is a new user role. So we have a new user role. It's called the user administrator role. So what is this? We already have an administrator role. Yes, I understand. But there were requests that we have a role that only allows that person to manage the users that have access to the server. So in one particular case, the customer had an external group that actually managed the servers, and so the actual storage admins didn't actually want that control. They wanted to give it to the external group, and so they can define a user administrator outside their area that assigns those the other various roles, session operator, etc. However, another reason why we implemented it is to provide some tighter security for the CSM server. So what you can do is, so an administrator will need to be established. An administrator has, as a refresher, has total access, can do anything on the, not a user administrator, but a regular administrator has total access over the whole server. They can modify anything. So that you will need an administrator to set things up on the server initially, creating storage connections, etc. Some of the other server-wide tasks. But what they can do is after those are set up, assign a user administrator and then remove anybody from the administrator role. All sessions can then be managed by session operator roles so that nobody has access to the all-powerful administrator role. And now, how does that provide tighter security? Well, now you can set a process in place where if someone you do need to do administrative tasks, you can have a process that says, okay, requests from the user admins that have temporary administrator access, grant them that access. They do what they need to do. User administrator ensures that they only did what they were supposed to do, and then they put them back to a session operator so that they don't have the all-powerful access anymore. So for the majority of the time, you're running without that fully administrator, anyone with that full administrator privileges. So user administrator, we have some future plans as well to help with additional security, tighter security. But this is the first step so that you can split them out from the regular administrator. All right, the next one I want to talk about is we added official support for IBM FlashSystem 9100 storage systems. So if you're not familiar, FlashSystem 9100 came out. It takes advantage of both Spectrum virtualized and NVMe technology to give you fast, high-end flash storage system, and so now CSM and 624 can connect to those devices and discover them as FlashSystem 9100 devices. You could connect them before, but they would show up as Spectrum virtualized devices and not specifically 9100 devices. So all you do is you create storage, add storage system wizard. You would go to the FlashSystem Spectrum virtualize icon, click on that, add the credentials, and we'll connect and start displaying and discover all the volumes, etc., and display it as a FlashSystem 9100. All right, the next one I'm talking about is some currency stuff for Spectrum Accelerate, in particular the FlashSystem 89000 devices. And that is in terms of HyperSwap. So 89000 recently added HyperSwap support for Metromirror local pairs, and so in CSM we have added that support as well. We're very excited about this. You can create a Metromirror failover failback session, attach copy sets with those 89000 devices, and then in the properties panel, select Manage H1 H2 with HyperSwap. And we will establish the relationships on the hardware in HyperSwap mode, so that so those that aren't aware what HyperSwap does is that any primary I/O error that occurs to your device will automatically cause the I/O to swap to the secondary device without any user intervention. So this gives you high availability in the event that you have a problem with your primary storage system or a communication with the primary storage system. So any unplanned event gets swapped automatically, have your high availability, but also provides swap by command, so you can issue a HyperSwap command and swap everything to the secondary storage system in cases of maybe you have maintenance or want to do a site swap for some other reason. So with that, I want to actually jump into a demo so I can show you this live in action. So here's my CSM server. I already have a CSM XIV session prepped and ready. If you see, I drill into the copy sets. I have, this is a 2 copy set session, so 4 volumes, all stemming from a given FlashSystem 8000 device. Now, if I go, this is just a Metro Mirror. You can see Metro Mirror failover failback session. I created that failover session, added those 8000 devices, and then in the View Modify Properties, under the H1H2 Options tab, you can see it has the Manage H1H2 with HyperSwap. So if that's checked, as it is, I say OK. I can now issue a start command. So you'll see that you don't say start HyperSwap or anything. All you have to do is set that property, start H1H2, say yes. Now CSM is going out to the primary A9000 device, setting up a consistency group with those volumes, going to the secondary A9000 device, consistency group with those volumes, and then creating the HyperSwap relationship across the thing. So once HyperSwap is running and enabled, you'll see the HyperSwap yes, and you'll see our HyperSwap icon. So this is the same icon we have for ZOS, HyperSwap, etc. But now we have, it includes A9000 support. So you want to see proof that we set it up. I'm going to go straight to the Hyperscale Manager that's managing those devices. And you can see here I have a consistency group on my various storage systems, primary and secondary. They are, in fact, in an auto failover capability mode, meaning HyperSwap is enabled. So everything's running, everything's HyperSwap relationship, and it's good to go. Volumes themselves as well, you can see that the relationship's a HyperSwap relationship and in those consistency groups. All right, so now you want to see a swap. So it's just issuing a swap by command is pretty simple. You go into commands, say HyperSwap. You'll see that our dynamic picture indicates that the direction of the replication is going to be reversed and will be put back into HyperSwap mode, but going in the opposite direction. So all my I/O after this command is done is going to be start writing from the H1 device to the H2 devices. Say yes. You see the arrow switch like that. We're already prepared. If I go to the GUI over here, Hyperscale Manager GUI, you can see that now the device is actually swapped, which one was the primary, which is the secondary. So I don't have it set up to do an unplanned swap, but I can simulate one by swapping from the Hyperscale Manager. So without issuing it from the CSM, I'm going to do a switch roles from Hyperscale Manager. I say yes. He's doing that swap on the hardware side. Now you see Winter's Cummings, the new primary. Everything's established in autofail mode over again. And look at that. We already modified it in CSM. We caught the event, and changed the direction of the arrow back from H1 to H2. So some of the other things you can do is we still have, even though it has high availability capabilities, we still have DR capability as well, so that you can still suspend the relationship. That's going to stop the HyperSwap. So now there is no replication from H1 to H2. You're no longer HyperSwap. HyperSwap's disabled. You'll see a little warning message saying HyperSwap's disabled. And all replication's been suspended. I can then recover to the remote site. So now I'm going to manually switch everything. So this doesn't automatically cause H1 I/O to go to H2. You'll have to manually switch those over. But from a replication standpoint, I'm now made H2 and doing the failover for H1 and H2. So now I'm going to enable copy back to site 1. That's our little protection mechanism. Make sure you don't you go in the correct direction. And now I'm going to reverse the replication and do a start H2, H1. So he started up, he established everything, and he is ready to go. And there he went, all pretty fast. Went back into HyperSwap mode. I go back over here, and you'll see that the roles switched on the hardware as well. So one other thing I want to show you, I'm going to HyperSwap back to the original mode so you can see. But we also support converting. So A9000 allows you to convert between HyperSwap and MetroMirror mode. This is how you would do it. You view modified properties, H1, H2, uncheck that property box. That's it. Just uncheck the property box. So we're no longer, you're telling CSM you no longer want us to manage it with HyperSwap. Click OK. And now we issued the command to the convert. You'll see the icon disappeared. You'll see there is no HyperSwap listed in the status column here. And then if I go to HyperScale Manager, you'll see that he's a sync mirror now and not an auto failover mirror. And vice versa, if I want to enable HyperSwap again, I would just check that, say OK, and now you can see even though the relationship was running in MetroMirror mode, I'm now converting it and straight into HyperSwap mode. Icons back, HyperSwap yes, auto failover capability is showing on HyperScale Manager. So that's pretty much the gist of it. You can see that now we made it very simple. You don't have to worry about issuing commands to the primary or the secondary of the A9000. CSM handles all that for you. All you have to do is define a CSM session that has your pairs in it, and we manage which A9000 primary, with the primary, the secondary to issue the commands to, as well as coordinate creating the consistency groups on each of the devices. All right, and that's it. I know we just released the CSM 623 back in October, but we managed to get out these key features here, so helping out a lot. Some of them are actually requests for enhancements, so they're actually customer requests coming in. So we hope you're happy with our new release, given the short run rate, but 624 does have a lot of great features that hopefully you can take advantage of. Thank you.